You can go whenever you would like to.
Would just not like to for school too.
There you go.
Why is that for you?
Sorry. Okay.
Can we get a podium?
All right, for the Prime Minister, constructive, no more than 7 minutes each.
All right, Perkins.
You're my least favorite person right now.
You're my favorite.
Okay.
Oh, Perkins.
Okay.
Oh.
Everybody good?
That'll happen.
Ready?
Yeah.
Yeah. Opponent's ready. Audience ready. Awesome.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump into the speech, starting off with the resolution analysis. Resolution today was the United States federal government should significantly decrease economic relations with the People's Republic of China. The text. Can I text yours back first? We'll go background first. Background first. Background on this. China's pegging currency currently in the status quo. What we mean by pegging currency, China's money, they're making their money so that it buys more on the international market, which is having devastating effects on the economy. It's creating trade surpluses of 916 billion, and it's the biggest currency manipulator in the entire globe, which is creating China as this kind of financial bully in which they are continually manipulating the currency on the international market. Which leads us to the plan. The United States federal government will economically sanction international banks from the People's Republic of China. Yes, the United States federal government will economically sanction international banks from the People's Republic of China. Alright, which leads us to our solvency. This pressures China to stop currency manipulation. An example of this is Russia during the Cold War when we invoked economic sanctions on them. We see that it increases economic relations and the economy goes back to being stable and increases versus where China is having devastating effects on the international economy. Which leads us into our first advantage of the economy. Uniqueness 1, economy is showing recovery. The A point under this is the jobs growth is increasing. Little I under this is last year's unemployment was 7.2%, which is now 6.1%. B, more people are investing. The second argument under this is the United States lost 2.7 million jobs due to the trade deficit with China. 3, the current problems with stock investments have been caused with China's pegging of money. So you see that these problems are being caused by China's pegging of the currency and China's manipulation of the currency, which leads us to our links. 1, according to the Hill and Ohio Representative Tim Ryan, sanctioning China will increase jobs in the United States by 1 million. The second argument under this is plan incentivizes even more job growth, which will decrease unemployment and increase economic stability. We'll see more jobs being created and more jobs being available to United States citizens, so it will not only just affect the world market, but also affect the United States personally. Going on to the internal links, the first is job growth, which equals increased spending money. When we have increased jobs, we have more people getting money and they're allowed to spend more. We don't have people harboring these money in their pockets. So when we see more money getting put into the economy, more money being spent, more people being able to go out and buy things, which makes the economy grow more, which is more money circulated, which flourishes the economy, which leads us to our impacts. First is the global economy will increase. When the United States economy increases, so does the rest of the world, as the United States is a leader in that. We see when the top dog of the world is increasing their economy, we'll see the rest of the nations follow suit. So you'll see the global economy increase. Second will be poverty will decrease. With job and unemployment decreasing and jobs increasing in the United States, you'll see poverty decreasing and more people are able to have that quality of life that they deserve. Leading us to our third impact of quality of life increasing for United States citizens, as well as the world economy, where we will have a better choice of action and better lifestyle choices for these individuals in which they can get that quality of life that they deserve. Which leads us into our second advantage of hedge. Uniqueness 1, the United States is top dog now. Anyone who challenges that reshuffles the economic and political order. When you see that the United States is the top and leading power, we have this stabilizing power structure in which we don't have people competing for power, and which leads to wars and things like that. You see these people being able to have this leading power instead of a bunch of different powers, like multipolarity. With the United States leading now, we have unipolarity, which has the least amount of wars post-World War II. The links of this, you have the United States as the top dog, and passing plan enforces that. Passing plan reinforces hedge, which continues to stabilize the economy, continues to stabilize the world powers. Internal links are the economy will increase, and the impacts are you avoid war. Whenever you have competing powers competing for the top dog position that the United States now holds, you will see wars erupting, resource wars, things like that, in which they're competing for the power, competing to be that top dog position. When the United States holds that top dog position, they reduce this chance of war. The second argument under this is protecting human rights. Whenever we are avoiding these wars and whenever we have a global agreement about what is right and what's wrong and who is able to enforce this, we have less human rights violations, which is what we have on hedge. So ultimately what you see in this round today is we are going to significantly decrease economic relations with the People's Republic of China by increasing sanctions on China, which will ultimately increase the world economy, be able to create more jobs, be able to create more of a financial flow for the United States as well as the world economy, and take away China's power that you see currently, in which they are able to manipulate the economies and able to completely skew the entire world out of their abilities to purchase goods and things like that. And you will see a reinforcement of the United States hedge, which will decrease chances of war. Anything else you have to say? All right, with that, we can see the rest of our 48 seconds.
Now welcome to the floor.
Stop
We'll
it.
see. Not to speak for more than 8 minutes. This is less enthusiastic questions.
Less enthusiastic.
This is Perkins after he hears a really bad tripod. That's
Hey,
basically.
we picked him up on tricot. Only team ever to pick up Perkins on tricot. Zach and Rotary.
Should I go on first or off first?
I'll first all this. Yeah.
Alright.
Is it in order?
20 sheets?
Yeah. 2 off, and then on case.
Grazie. Yeah, you can use that.
Judges
time,
ready?
No problem.
Cool. Uniqueness. 1. China has a whole bunch of human rights abuses in the quo. A. China executes more people each year than any other country combined, which is about 1,718 people per year. This is 3/4 of the world's executions. B. China's judicial system falls way short of international standards. Like, people lack an access to lawyers, and they accept confessions through tortures, and there's often political interference in the realm. 2. China brainwashes its populations. The warrant under this is people are detained and re-educated through labor for approximately 4 years before being released back into the population. 3. They abuse activists and political oppositions. The warrant for this is tens of thousands of members of the band. What's this?
It's Falun Gong. It's
It's
a
the
religion.
band Falun Gong movement have been detained and thrown into labor camps and prisons. 4. Social stratification in China is getting worse. A 2014 study found that
Oh, the top 5%.
the top 5% of China took 23% of income, while the bottom 5% earned less than 1% of it. This means that more human rights abuses occur in China, and it means that China and
means the China. there's
China
gonna be
doesn't like
increase.
help the poor people, and
There's gonna be like more people on the bottom as opposed to the top.
there will be more people on the bottom as opposed to the top post plan. Links. 1. The plan for Chinese government, like it consistently marginalizes the poor. A. Sanctions have and
Sanctions that arrows on increase.
sanctions have an increase in harm to those who are already poor. An example of this is like we look at Iran and Cuba. When we had these sanctions, what it did was it hurt the people who were already being pushed to the margins, and it just leads to their death. 2, we decrease U.S. engagement and increase China's capacity to continue this abuse. The points under this are like we have less awareness when we don't interact with them, and so it increases otherization. U.S. publicity is what keeps China in check in the squo. 3 is economic isolation and socio-political isolation. Like an example of this is Soviet Russia, and how like our isolationist stance with them led to more abuses within their state. And another one is Mao Zedong in China. Like when
Like before the open door policy, like there was a lot of human rights abuses, and then after like the United States got involved, like a lot of that went down.
So before the open door policies, they had like a ton of human rights abuses, and then as soon as we started interacting with them, those fell away. Impacts for this is going to be human rights. A, the plan increases human rights abuses in China. B, this increases otherization of marginal voices, and this otherization like justifies dehumanizing these people and treating them worse than they already are. And this dehumanization is what leads people to justify killing them. Like as soon as you're able to justify treating someone as if their life has no value, then there's no reason for you not to just kill them. Second disadvantage. Uniqueness. 1, Sino-American tensions are high. A, China is in the middle of an economic transition from like a construction economy to a consumption economy, and this means that their market is super unstable. B, Chinese officials are mad at the US. Like they had a hacking incident involving a whole bunch of their higher officers, and we said these people broke the law in the international realm and put out warrants for their arrest, and China's not happy about that. C, China's business relations are really contentious with US businesses. Like they've got these state-run businesses, and when we interact in China with our businesses, like they don't like how we're treating their businesses because they're state-run. 2, economic hedge. A, the USFG relies upon coalitions when we take international actions, and we can see this through like ISIS airstrikes, where we recruited a whole coalition of like local nations in order to actually get things we wanted to do done, and the Ebola reaction, where we like created this multinational group to go and work together to fix it. Like we don't go out on our own anymore. B, China has BRICS for economic security. Like we don't have our own coalition of people who are willing to support us if we get into like economic problems. C, China's GDP, according to Nobel Prize winning economist Guton Hedge, is going to be at 123 trillion by 2040. 3, the petrodollar is dying. A, China buys gold and it significantly decreases the significance of US dollars in China's economy. And 1, Russia is selling like tons of oil to other countries in other currencies than the petrodollar, which is like we force Saudi Arabia to sell in dollars, and that's kind of made the oil market a dollar-heavy market, and it makes us relevant to the world, but we're not going to be relevant anymore. Like Russia's selling in other currencies, come on. Link 1, plan increases sanctions, and like China, and when China overtakes the US in economic and hedge relations in the Southeast China area, like we start seeing more contentious relations between the two of us. Moving on to internal links. A, China is ready for conflict. 1, they have more alliances than us. Like they have more international alliances with other countries than we do in the squo. 2, they're willing to infringe upon US hedge in the region. And we can see this through like their actions in the South China Sea and how they're like willing to be threatening towards like other areas where we've generally claimed hegemony, but we don't actually have it there. 3, they have international investments in like a whole bunch of nations across the world. They're equivalent to like in their amount of economic hedge to us. And the B point under this is that they're overtaking US hedge in regional areas. We can see this through their relation with the DPRK, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. And 2, the Xi Jinping, who is the Chinese president, he stated that the Chinese people need to increase their own, or need to uphold their, the Chinese people need to uphold the security of Asia as a whole. And the impacts on this are going to be A, econ collapse in America. 1, Chinese economy is going to collapse the US economy. Like they've got this growth that we don't have, and if we try to go to war with them, it's going to crush our economy. Like as much as we talk about the great job increases and all this stuff, our economy is just like sitting there. We just got out of a recession, and China's upholding like more than double our growth. We could both lose percentage points to the T, and China would come out ahead. Like that's just not a war we're going to get into. B, proxy wars. So when we go and we take this action against China, what they're going to do is they're going to use the hegemony that they currently have in the region to start taking land to support their own economy's growth. Oh, yeah, I know. So when China and the US start fighting, it's going to create a whole bunch of small wars. But as we can see, like small wars between large groups lead to big wars, and proxy wars increase significantly the percentage chance of a nuclear war. 3, China's small military is going to necessitate them moving to nukes because it's the only way that they can combat our forces. Moving on to the app, going into the plan text, you talk about how we're going to sanction international banks from China. Is this including Chinese banks? Like China has a whole bunch of their own banks, and when you say that we're going to sanction international banks, does that mean that you have to stop China's own banks from operating within China? I don't think you have the fiat to do that. Moving through, do you have any points that you want me to make really fast? Otherwise, I'm going to go on to Advantage 2.
Yeah, just go to Advantage.
Okay, Advantage 2, they talk about how hedge stabilizes and how we're in a multipolar situation, but that's not true. Like, we have regional hegemony, but we don't have a hedge over the whole world.
Okay.
Hang on.
Homestead roadmap. I'm gonna do on case and off case.
In order?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey Jake, I got your whole speech that time, so that's good.
Hey, if you guys are gonna talk more, start your time.
Yeah, don't cheat. Be nicer about it.
Hit the start.
Cheaters go home.
Oh, Bart, put it down.
I don't know how to hit start.
You see Joe putting that on your targeted
Okay.
post? That's my favorite. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Starting time.
Okay, starting off with our arguments on our first advantage, they're saying that the Chinese economy is going to hurt the U.S. economy. Cross-apply the arguments from our second advantage, which went untouched by the negative team. The U.S. hedge is going to prevent the Chinese economy from hurting the U.S. economy. My second response is that there are still other types of markets. China's economy cannot collapse the global market because their economy is not as big of a factor in the global economy than the U.S.'s economy is. Thus, there's no way that the Chinese economy stopping currency manipulation is going to. Yeah, China's economy collapse. Say that again. China's economy and the U.S.'s economy are intertwined, so if one collapses, the other is going to collapse as well, and China isn't going to want to collapse their own economy, which is why they're doing currency manipulation in the first place, to try and increase their economy. So that's not going to happen. My second response is that China isn't going to risk war with the United States or any other country specifically because the U.S. has such a high military. My third response is that sanctions are enough to persuade China to stop their currency manipulation. Forbes magazine said in 2013 that a policy to increase sanctions on China to prevent currency manipulation would deter China from manipulating currency in the future. Again, cross-applied the argument that we had in the background, which went untouched by the negative team, that the example of Russia during the Cold War and how we put economic sanctions on that. Again, that example went untouched. Moving on down to on the plan text, where they said that China has their own banks and we can't fiat their banks. Yes, we do have the fiat to control who the U.S. Works with. We're not saying that we're fiating with the we're not stopping China's banks from doing their own thing. We're stopping the U.S. from interacting economically with China's banks and international banks that interact with China. That's how we're stopping the currency manipulation. Moving on down to advantage 1, on both advantage 1 and advantage 2, they went mainly untouched by the negative team. You can cross-apply all the arguments under advantage 1. We're still sanctioning China. This number went untouched. Sanctioning China is going to increase jobs in the U.S. by 1 million, at least 1 million, and it's going to also incentivize jobs in the U.S., which is going to increase jobs globally and decrease poverty in the U.S. and globally. On advantage 2, again, completely untouched by the negative team. The U.S. is top dog now, and that's another reason why China can't collapse the global market, because the U.S. is the top dog and not China. Moving on down to the first disadvantage by the negative team. On the increasing human rights abuses in China, China is perpetuating poverty in their own country by doing currency manipulation. Basically, they're trying to manipulate the global market, which is hurting their people more than anything else. So it's it's also hurting other nations, people like the U.S.'s, and so by actually stopping the currency manipulation by China, it's actually going to be decreasing the human rights abuses in China more than it would be increasing, like the negative team says, because they're perpetuating poverty in their own country first, then other countries. We have levels of poverty in other countries because they're unable to compete on the world market because of China's currency manipulation. Again, they're manipulating over $916 billion globally. Moving on down to their argument about China buying gold.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the number, please?
916 billion. Moving on down to their argument that China's buying gold and that they are on a disadvantage too. The entire uniqueness is reinforcing the econ advantage, showing why China pegging their currency is a bad thing. We don't want China to be continuing to manipulate their currency, which is exactly what the uniqueness of their disadvantage is saying. Yeah, their uniqueness is saying that it's decreasing the United States dollar, which is exactly what we're saying as well. The disadvantage actually flows to the affirmative team side because it's showing that currency manipulation is a bad thing on a global scale because it's decreasing our economy and theirs. Yeah, touched on earlier. China's not going to go to war with the U.S. because again, cross-play the hedge arguments. The U.S. is the top dog right now, and China's not going to want to enter into a war with us because we do have a bigger military than we do, and they're not going to. And going to war, China going to war with the U.S. would lead to mutually assured destruction, which is definitely something that China doesn't want. In all of our eyes, if China ended up going to war with the U.S. over the sanctions that we're putting on them, that's going to lead to effectively World War III, which is not something that the U.S. or China is going to want. So there's no way China's actually going to go to war with the U.S. over these sanctions. And again, sanctions have been proven in the past, economic sanctions have been proven in the past to change a country's policy on something like the Russia example in the Cold War. Ultimately, they have no solvency, and their disadvantages don't stand. Anything else? That we can see the rest of our time.
Cool.
Hang on. I want those who watch later to be able to get the overview. Hit it.
Separate sheet for an overview, and then let's go. Want to go off on?
Yep.
Cool. So overview,
Same order?
Same order, off and on. If you have anything to tell me, that's good to know. Anybody not ready?
You said off and on?
Yep.
Okay.
Everybody good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Start off with the overview. First of all, the reason why you will be voting today for GCU OB is because the affirmative case effectively perpetuates human rights abuses with no intentions of actually looking at the problems and trying to solve it. The NC does. Let's look on case as to why that is. First of all, on the top of the human rights disadvantage brought up by the negative, the affirmative comes up and says like the China's manipulating their own country and that's why human rights abuses like look so bad in China. First of all, that's not true because we brought up empirical things about how China executes over 1,000 people per year, which makes up more than 3/4 of the execution across the entire world. That's probably a bad thing. That's probably a lot of human rights abuses. You can't contribute to the economy. You can't contribute to anything like positive that they bring up, like jobs and everything that they talk about in the affirmative if you're dead. Like that's kind of a no-brainer thing. Let's be 100% honest. And even if you like don't believe that, you can extend it under the uniqueness talking about the second point, how China has a lot of like judicial system problems with the brainwashing and everything. Probably a bad idea. That sounds like a human rights abuse to me. Third point about like the political opposition and everything, again, more human rights abuses. And then fourth point about like, again, just general human rights abuses happening in China without the United States there. This is gonna be a bad thing. Gonna be more human rights abuses for the area, which could spread throughout the country. And throughout like the region, probably bad. Go down to the links about how like they talk, how it really went like untouched. We said that like the plan marginalizes people more, which is again, bad thing. We also accept the fact that like we said that if there's going to be a decrease in like United States engagement, there's going to be an increase of abuse in the region. Like we saw this, like what were the examples that we brought up about, or
like Iran.
Yeah, like there's Iran and there's Cuba, how like once the United States sanctions were lifted and then the United States had more of like a say in what was going on, the human rights abuses in the area went down. We want to keep that happening. We don't want these human rights abuses to happen. Again, they talk about all the good things happening about how like China human rights abuses are going to decrease and then like the United States jobs are going to increase. That's not going to happen in the world of the affirmative. Like again, when there's United States publicity in the area, there's going to be a decrease in all of the abuses. So at that point, you can extend the impact of human rights, like increase in human rights on the disadvantaged one, go to disadvantaged two. What did they say on that? Nothing?
They said to cross-apply their arguments about hedge.
Yeah, okay,
Instead.
yeah, that's, like, you can't necessarily cross-apply their, like, stuff about hedge here, because we're talking about economics hedge, or like their entire advantage two, right, that they were talking about hedge? Yeah, their entire advantage two is talking about how we have the, like, military hedge in the area, but we don't have economic hegemony. Right now, China is the #1, or, like, economic hegemon in the world. That's probably something that's gonna be really bad. If the United States puts up sanctions, then that's going to tear down the entire world economy. The United States isn't even in the top, isn't even the top 3. It goes right now, it's like China, and then India, and then even Russia's coming in because Russia's improving, and then it's the United States. So if we take stuff away, if we say sanctions up on China, that's probably not going to be a good thing for the world economy. Like, you can't apply the hedge thing, the hedge advantage here.
On hedge, China has 3 times as many free trade agreements as the U.S.
Right. Also, China has 3 times as many free trade agreements as the United States does, which means that
their sanctions don't matter.
Yeah, sanctions with the United States don't necessarily matter because they have other places to go, which means again, what is their plan doing? Only increasing human rights abuse is probably a bad thing. At that point, you can extend all of disadvantage to, especially the impacts talking about how there's going to be United States economic collapse. Right now, China owns approximately 1/3 of the United States debt, which means that if we've had sanctions with China, that means that where's all of that U.S. debt going? Where is that? We don't know what's happening there. It means the United States is going to make, the U.S. economy is going to collapse, and then everything that they talk about in their impact scenario about how there's going to be global economic collapse, that's going to happen. That's only going to happen if we enact plan. Also, extend proxy wars. That went unanswered. On plan text, we talked about their own banks, how they're talking about we're going to place economic sanctions on international banks from the People's Republic of China. We said, there's a lot of international banks in China. And they're yeah, but we have the fiat to close Chinese banks, which isn't necessarily true because we're the United States, we're not the People's Republic of China. Also, we don't have the fiat to close Chinese banks because that means that we're screwing ourselves because again, China owns about 1/3 of the United States debt, meaning that we don't know where that money is going from. There's probably going to be inflation. There's probably going to be a lot of human rights abuses both in China and in the United States because China relies on the United States just as much as the United States relies on China. This is a symbiotic relationship as much as we don't want to acknowledge that it is, meaning that if one goes down, so does the other.
Before you leave disadvantage, they talked about how many increased jobs that people can't work.
Oh yeah. Also, there's going to be an increase in jobs, and you can cross-apply proxy wars here. If the United States places sanctions on China, there's going to be not only an increase in the Chinese human rights abuses, but that means there's going to be it's going to happen in the United States also because the U.S. economy is going to collapse. It means that the jobs that they say they're going to create won't matter because people won't be able to obtain them because they're probably dead because economic collapse and they can't afford food and all that fun stuff. Go on to advantage 1. You can turn the advantage 1 clean. You can turn all of it. And you can cross apply our disadvantage 2, talking about how Let's see what exactly I wrote down for this bench too. What did I write down for this bench? I don't know. Like, they just say that like the United States is showing recovery and how there's like a decrease in unemployment in the United States, and like there's a lot of problems with China and the United States relying upon each other. But first of all, if like China goes down and we're all going to go down, that's probably a bad thing. Again, like increased human rights abuses. Also, like again, China owns 1/3 of our economy, which means that like if we go down, they go down again. It means that like all of their impacts are going to be like hardcore. Like all of the impacts we bring up for like human rights abuses are going to like definitely happen. On links, they talk about sanctions will increase jobs in the United States. Oh, that's not necessarily true because like the United States can still export jobs to other countries because like other countries will do work for cheaper, meaning that like those 1 million jobs won't necessarily go to the United States, they might go out, which means like we don't gain the benefit from that. Also, the United States like needs China to buy their exports because like we don't export to many other countries. Like we export to other countries, but not as heavily as we do to China. It means that like we're gonna hurt there again, economic collapse in the United States, which leads to global collapse, probably bad. Which means like extend all of their impacts because they're going to be worse. On advantage to hedge turn again because like they're talking about military hedge, whether it's where we are the top dog. We're not necessarily, right now we're not the economic hegemon, which means that like all of the things that they talk about in this example don't matter because like when there's economic collapse then nobody can afford a military, which means nobody can protect themselves, which means everybody dies. Which means again, all of their positive impacts don't work, which means that the negative definitely gets all of those. Again, go back to the overview that I read talking about how like they perpetuate human rights abuses. The negative avoids that because at least we're like taking an active step towards helping because the United States, like we talked about again, US publicity usually means decrease in human rights abuses. At the point where like we're winning everything on the flow is the point where you're voting for GCU OB. Yeah.
Overview on top, DA1, and impact calc.
The employees should flow the impact out.
Same sheet as overview.
Same sheet as overview.
For next to or
Below.
He's Nick McCracken.
Alright, before I go on to the overview, I really want to just like thank my partner. She totally felt that. Overview, you're gonna vote neg because the app perpetuates human rights abuses, and that's bad. Dropping into disadvantage 1. Okay, so just a quick flow through the uniqueness. Like, when we look at how many people China is executing, they talk about how they're perpetuating human rights abuses, and like, once you're dead, nothing else matters. It doesn't matter if they're increasing jobs because people are dying. Like, you can't work a job if you're dead, and without the US being in China, human rights abuses will increase. We can see that it flows all the way through the entire round. This is the only thing that matters. Like, when we can prove that human rights abuses will increase without US intervention, we have a situation in which the US must stay there or people are going to die. Okay, moving on to
I don't know, like flesh out human rights abuses again, like it's not only death, it's also dehumanization. Like
Yeah.
that's probably a bad thing.
okay, just like we can take a whole bunch of like our uniqueness points about like how China abuses its activists and its political opponents by sending like thousands of people into like work camps, and they send them just to be like tortured and beaten till they die.
Well, the
And
reason we know
that's
about this is because the United States is there, if we're not there, then we're not gonna know the abuses.
Yeah, that's bad. And the only reason why we know that currently is because the US is there. When we move out, the human rights abuses are going to increase, and we're not going to be able to do anything to stop it. Moving on to links. Like, our link story is super solid. Like, plan increases, like, the Chinese government's policies that marginalize the poor. Straight across, like, decreasing US engagement increases the Chinese capacity for abuse. Economic isolation and socio-political isolation encourage more abuses. Cross-player examples in Soviet Russia and Mao Zedong in China. On to human rights and why it's the most important thing. So, human rights. The plan increases human rights abuses. Human rights abuses are bad because, like, when you don't have quality of life, you're living a life that's not worth living. And when society recognizes that, they start treating you like your life doesn't matter. And that's what's happening in the SCLO, and that's what we're trying to stop. Like, when we pass plan, it leads to increased abuses, and that's just unacceptable. You can't run a plan that's going to increase huge amounts of dehumanization and death, and China's the place where this is happening. Moving on to dehumanization, like, living a life that's not worth living is the worst thing imaginable. Like, it's literally a state worse than death. That's what dehumanization means, and that's how it should be floating around. This is what you need to take first. Next point, death. Death gives us, like, it's irreversible. I mean, come on, we've got that. And then we look at, I'm just gonna pull our uniqueness point from 1 on how China has 3/4 of the world's executions. This is the biggest magnitude that exists in the round. Like, when we've got 75% of the entire world's executed population, you have to just kind of admit that this is the most important thing. We have magnitude, we have reversibility. Anything else? Like,
If we're weighing around on net benefits, like, life is pretty net beneficial.
yeah, if we're weighing around on net benefits, which seems like a pretty solid net benefit.
Yeah. That benefits is not brought up in any speech today.
It's implied.
Implied.
Point doesn't matter. Well, kind of irrelevant at this
I
point.
just wanted to do it.
If you're gonna do one to stop this flow, you need to do it way earlier.
Yeah, not in like
I
the last
just wanted
5
to say the
seconds.
words point of order, so don't be concerned
Okay.
about it.
You can just yell poo, because that's what I thought Nick was saying.
Point of order.
Yeah.
Oh,
Poo.
So much
Okay.
that for.
Okay, if we're weighing the round through net benefits, like, life is kind of awesome, and it's kind of net beneficial to be alive and not dead, so there's that.
Okay, so we're going to go over to and then off case, on case. Everybody grab the roadmap in order.
If you're going off in order, on in order.
Yep. Overview on top.
Solid.
Good. Starting time. I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. Awesome round. Going into our overview today, you will be voting for GCU's affirmative team today because we significantly increase both the world and the United States economy through the implementation of the plan text. Go on to off-case uniqueness. Off-case advantage 1, disadvantage 1. They talk about the human rights abuses and things like that, how China's executing people. We're saying that this argument is non-unique because they don't talk about any of this. Like, there's no specific arguments that connect this to
Point of
plan.
order.
How does stop the time?
Definitely didn't bring up non-unique in the first, like, in the member speech.
My partner brought this up in her speech.
The response?
My partner brought this up in her speech when she
Where?
was addressing the execution.
Under consideration. I'll find it in my flow on my computer too, so.
Starting time, yeah. So it's a non-unique argument. We'll go on to the next point. They talk about how they just talk about how we are perpetuating human rights abuses, and we don't see how this connects to our case because we are simply increasing sanctions against China, which is going to decrease human rights abuses, as we see that the negative team is going to, the affirmative team is not increasing human rights abuses. In fact, we're decreasing human rights abuses, as my partner brought up in her speech about how they are continuing poverty in other nations by allowing for China to manipulate the actual currency. By manipulating the currencies, they are not allowing a fair world market in which other people can buy on the same fair grounds, which is increasing poverty in other nations. So that's what we're talking about with human rights abuses being increased by the negative methodologies and what the negative's saying. So the negatives, human rights abuses, are actually on them, not on our case. Going on to the second disadvantage, we talked about how their entire uniqueness is reinforcing the economy advantage that we talked about, why China's pegging currency is currently bad. They talked about how there is no economic hedge in the United States, and there are three times as many free trade agreements. But like my partner said, the United States and China's economies are intertwined, and if one collapses, the other is going to collapse. We talked about how intertwined they are. If one collapses, the other is going to collapse. So you're not going to see, like, that's where the economic hedge comes from, the intertwining of China and United States, because they are so intertwined on so many different levels. If one collapses, the other is going to follow. So these sanctions are not going to collapse the United States and just create this giant hole that the negative team creates on their flow. It doesn't work that way. We are intertwined. One thing happens to one country, it's going to happen to the other. If they're so intertwined as China and the United States are, they can't create a world separated from this. So basically their entire disadvantage too doesn't apply. They said, and then in the MO speech, she said that sanctions with the United States don't matter, which completely delinks their entire disadvantage one. When they said sanctions with the United States don't matter, they're saying that, like, if we have these sanctions, they literally have no weight. So the entire thing about sanctions with the United States are going to create human rights abuses and things like that, completely delinked in that statement when they said sanctions with the United States don't matter. Going on to on case, they talked about how we're closing the banks with our plan text. We're not closing the banks, we're sanctioning them. If the affirmative team didn't understand the definition of sanctions, they should have asked in the beginning. So we're not closing banks, we're sanctioning them. Going on to advantage one of the economy, they're talking about how in our internal links we talked about job growth and how more money is going to be circulated, which is going to create more of a flourishing economy, and quality of life is going to go up. They talked about how we're not accounting for job exports. However, we have in our first link argument on advantage one that a source that cites that it's going to increase jobs in the United States by, where is that number? By 1 million. That's excluding exported jobs. So that's 1 million within the United States that we have sorted in our very first advantage of economy. So everything they said about job exports holds no weight. So you can just flow everything from advantage one through. That's onto our ballot. There isn't any clear link story for how they got from our plan to mass death. There's nothing that said, like, that shows why plan is going to push us into mass death, as they already delink themselves from the human rights abuses. There's nothing showing that we're going to just have a bunch of death like they keep talking about. They keep talking about lives being lost. There's nothing there. Going on to the hedge, we're not winning on this argument, so and there's nothing put by the negative team on the argument, so we're just going to let this go. There's nothing put on it. We're not losing on it, so we're just going to flow it through. Going on to the voters, probability, we show probability of increasing the economic stability in the world economy, and we have magnitude of awesomeness.
Yeah, take 5.